Qualitative research has always wrestled with a core paradox. On one side, you have highly subjective, deeply personal human feelings. On the other, you have the massive, invisible societal structures that create them. For over a century, a field called phenomenology has studied raw, lived human experience. Founded by thinkers like Edmund Husserl, it focused on how individuals perceive their reality. Maurice Merleau-Ponty expanded this by anchoring perception in the physical body. But this traditional framework contained a significant blind spot. It tends to treat human experience as if it happens in a vacuum. It isolates the individual, bypassing the systemic power dynamics of race, gender, and economic class that dictate what a person is even allowed to feel. Modern theorists like Lisa Gunther and Gail Salomon developed critical phenomenology to bridge this gap. It takes the microscopic focus on lived experience and fuses it with the macroscopic lens of critical theory. This methodology targets the structural conditions that allow an experience to exist in the first place. To see how this works, we can look at the urban service sector of Thailand. It is a dense, highly layered social environment. Within this economy, female migrant workers perform essential labor, yet their daily lives remain largely unseen by the dominant culture they support. We are asking how these women perceive their working lives, and how that perception reveals hidden, intersecting structures of gender, ethnicity, and class. To find the answer, we will push a single, subjective data point from these workers through the 6-step methodology of critical phenomenology. Tracking this specific case reveals the mechanism used to map subjective exclusion onto tangible structural policies. Step 1 requires defining the specific marginalized group and selecting the theoretical lens, such as feminism or critical race theory, that will govern the inquiry. Step 2 targets the researcher through the concept of epoche, or bracketing. In traditional research, this is the attempt to erase personal bias to observe reality as objective truth. Critical phenomenology rejects the idea that a researcher can make themselves invisible. You cannot turn off your societal conditioning. Instead, it mandates researcher reflexivity. The researcher must map their own social position, class, gender, and background relative to their subjects. This mapping is recorded in a reflexivity journal, acknowledging that the researcher's identity shapes how the data is interpreted. By declaring this positionality, researchers turn their subjective identity into a calibrated analytical instrument. Step 3 uses purposive sampling. Rather than seeking statistical representation, it targets specific cohorts of 6 to 15 people to ensure analytical depth. This phase establishes relational ethics, where the researcher works to build a safe, balanced power dynamic with their subjects. Step 4 is data collection. Interviews must be semi-structured and non-leading. Asking a worker to list their problems immediately taints the data by assuming a specific narrative. The preferred approach uses open prompts, like "describe a day in your life." This allows the subject to dictate the architecture of their own story. The transcription process captures more than words. Every pause, sigh, and tone shift is meticulously recorded as vital phenomenological evidence. This focus on microscopic detail ensures the structural analysis is built on genuine human reality rather than researcher assumptions. Step 5 is the dual-layered analysis. This is where the methodology separates from traditional sociology. Layer 1 is the phenomenological analysis. Researchers use attentive reading to distill transcripts. A worker might say, "I feel like I am not seen as a human here, just labor." This distills the quote into a thematic essence, invisibility. Traditional research often stops at defining that feeling. Critical phenomenology moves to layer 2, critical interrogation. It asks why this feeling of invisibility exists and who benefits. The internal feeling is connected to external structures, pointing directly toward inadequate labor protection policies. It reveals how legal limitations on migrant mobility contribute to a feeling of being trapped, and it shows how societal xenophobia can reinforce a status as a perpetual outsider, which serves the interests of those seeking cheap labor. The dual-layered engine establishes a connection between a private emotional state and its corresponding social architecture. Step 6 ensures the methodology maintains a high standard of trustworthiness. Researchers must bring their structural conclusions back to the original subjects for verification. The subjects are given the power to challenge or reject the researcher's interpretation of their lives. This final check prevents an academic from overimposing their own theoretical agenda onto the subject's voice. The entire process drives towards the emancipatory aim. Under this framework, research is intended to demand change, not just describe a situation. The tangible output of our case study is a formalized policy proposal rooted in the identified structural pillars. It calls for the implementation of improved, safe grievance mechanisms within the workplace, and it demands expanding legal rights for migrants to access fundamental public services in the city. These policy demands are anchored in the specific verified realities of the workers who navigate these systems every day. The methodology does face constraints. One risk is over-theorizing, where a researcher might force an experience to fit a pre-selected framework. There is also the critique of limited transferability. Interviewing 10 people cannot yield data that is statistically representative of millions. However, statistical broadness often misses the invisible mechanisms of oppression that operate quietly beneath the surface of large datasets. Critical phenomenology's value lies in its depth, exposing the exact architecture of